Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is simply called Discerning What is True. Today is the 28th day of November 2024. I'm going to be sharing again a continuous segment of the Apocolypse Unsealed, that is, being an esoteric interpretation of the intuition of Johannes, which is talking about John. And I'm going to be reading again. This is the second part of this particular book. This is chapter 1 still. And there's now what I call the sections are going to be from 12 to 20 tonight. Glad you could be here. And I need to change one little thing here to make it a little bit easier for me to read. And the author's name is James M. Price, P-R-Y-S-E. Choose to look it up. He was a theosophist back in the 1800s and 1900s also. And where he gets most of his work is through what I call a Greek interpretation of scriptures here. Okay, let's get into the reading. I turned about to see the voice which was speaking with me. Having turned, I saw 7 little golden lampstands, and in the midst of the little lampstands, quote, apparition, like the Son of Man, S-O-N, wearing, quote, a vesture, reaching to the feet and girded at the paps, P-A-P-S, with a golden girdle. His head and his hair were white as white wool. That is, white as snow. And his eyes were as blaze of fire. His feet were like the liquid metal, that is, as if it had been melted in a furnace. His voice was as the voice of many waters. In his right hand he had 7 stars. From his mouth kept flashing forth a keen 2-edged sword. His face was luminous, brackets, as shines the sun by its inherited force. So he goes on and gives a commentary of what he's just stated here from Scripture. The apparition is a fanciful picture of the sun as a panagia or fount of all radiating light. And like all the puzzles of Johannes, it is ingeniously constructed. The, quote, voice, end quote, that speaks is the primary aspect of the second logos, in whom the 7, quote, voices, end quote, or vowels, then he has it in parentheses, for phonetic is the one Greek word for both vowel and voice, become differential. As the all-prevailing solar light, he walks about among the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 planetary bodies, holding in his right hand their 7 stars, the light which he confers upon them. The Logos figure described is a composite picture of the 7 sacred planets. He has the snowy white hair as Cronus. Cronus is simply Father Time. End quote. The blazing eyes of, quote, wide-seeing, end quote, Zeus, the sword of Eros, the shining face of Helios, and the chiton and girdle of Aphrodite. His feet are of Mercury, the metal sacred to Hermes, you see, and his voice is like the murmur of the ocean waves. Then he has another bracket here, says the many waters, in bracket, alluding to Selene, the moon goddess of the 4 seasons and of the waters. To have placed the winged feet of Hermes on the figure, or have used the ordinary word of hydrodigus, I should say, that is, quote, water silver. For Mercury would have made the puzzle altogether too transparent. So Johannes has employed the archaic word chalcolimbon, which he evidently borrowed from Plato to designate the material used in fabricating the feet of his planetary logos. Plato speaks of chalcolimbon, that is crystals, page 114, as a metal mined by the Atlanteans and esteemed by them as the most precious of metals except gold, which is in a series of esoteric correspondence. He does not describe it, but says Chalcolimbana is now only a name, but was then something more than a name, end quote. A statement that is no more than a sarcastic comment on the spiritual degeneracy of the times. So what he's saying here simply is that basically at this time factor, back in Greece time, things have degenerated since the time of the Atlanteans spiritually, is what he's saying. But in his highly technical alchemy work, that is Timetius, page 59, he unmistakably describes this metal, calling it simple chalcos and ranking it as a primary metal next to gold as a sort of a bright and condensed fluid, end quote. The word is rendered, quote, fine brass, end quote, in the authorized version, although brass was unknown to the Greeks, who used a bronze compost of copper and tin. So naturally, they mixed it, copper and tin, and it came up with what he was saying here is bronze. Chalcos was used as a general term for metal, as well as for copper in particular. The chalcolimbon is simply the, quote, metal that forms in drops, as does gum, G-U-M, excluding from the tree. It would probably be similar to what we call pine sap today, that is in drops. It is neither, quote, brass, end quote, nor, quote, incense gum, end quote, but simply quicksilver fluid, quote, as if melted in a furnace. This figure of the sun, S-U-N, as the ruler of the planets is a symbol of the incarnated self, the second logos, and is given in description of the apparition. The 7 planets are in reverse order, but the second logos is the inverted reflection of the first. The celestial man is, as it were, upside down when incarnated in the material world. The significance of this inversion develops later in the apocalyptic drama. Similar descriptions of the, quote, Son of Man, S-O-N, end quote, are to be found in Ezekiel and Zechariah and Daniel. But though similar, they are not the same. For the Apocalypse is sua generis, and while Ionis apparently borrows many symbols and poetic imageries from the ancient writings, he usually employs them to cloak his real meaning by endowing them with a different or a variant significance. Hence, the exotericus, that is, the exotericist sees everything on the outside. Esoterics actually see things within. Esoterics are what we call internally understanding. Esoterics do not see that. They don't understand it. Who attempt to follow these supposed parallels will only be misled and confused, as Ionis doubtlessly intended they should be. And since the commentary is not concerned with the esotericism of the Hebrew writings, the usual reference to them will be omitted. The real parallels between the Apocalypse and Plato's writings are much more numerous, though, and striking than these deceptive ones that are to be found in the Hebrew scriptures. Let's continue through the next section, which is still chapter 1. This is section 17 through 20. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as one dead. He placed his right hand on me, saying, quote, be not afraid. I am the first, then he puts it in bracket, Adam, and the last, Adam, he who is alive. I became a dead man, and behold, I am alive throughout the eons of the eons of the eons, and I have the keys of death and of the unseen. Write down the, quote, glories you saw, also those which are and those which are about to be attained next after them. Then he has it in brackets again, beginning with, in bracket, the mystery of the 7 stars which you saw on my right hand, and the 7 little golden lampstands. The 7 stars are the divinities of the 7 societies, and the 7 little lampstands are the 7 societies. He goes on to elaborate what he calls the commentary here on it. The esoteric tenet as to, quote, the first and the last, end quote, is fairly clearly stated by Paulius. That is in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 22, and also verse 45. Quote, for even as in the Adam, that is man, all became moribund, so likewise as Christ, man, all are restored to life, end quote. The first man, Adam, was born in a living psychic form. The last Adam, in the life-producing breath, is pneuma, which means spirit. So what he's talking about here is one is what we call psychic form, was born in a living psychic form. The last Adam in a long, what we call life-producing breath. So what he's explaining is simply is that Adam was a living psychic form, okay? And the last Adam, which is speaking of Christ, is a life-producing breath, spirit. Not what we call flesh, okay? Adam is representing the flesh, and Christ is representing the spirit. The Logos, or divine man, becomes, quote, dead, end quote, during the long cycles of material evolution. But as it emerges from material conditions through the awakening of the epistemology, that is, faculty or spiritual intuition, is restored to life. The man has then consciousness of immortality and holds the keys with which he can unlock the prison doors of the physical world. So he brackets this and says death. So this is a key thing, simply, is that he's talking about us. When someone comes to the point of understanding spiritual intuition, it is restored to life, for the man has then the consciousness of immortality. He understands now that he no longer is going to die, you see. And he holds these keys with which he can unlock the prison doors of the physical world, meaning he will no longer continue to reincarnate here. He will have the keys no longer to go through death and then be reborn and then die again and reborn, that type of thing. That is over with, you see. And the psyche world, or Hades, the, quote, unseen, end quote, this representation of incarnated life as the death-like obscuration of the soul is very common in ancient mystical literature. Plato put forward the ideal repeatedly, as in the Punnian etymology of the Creticals, that's on page 400. Quote, some say that the body, that is, soma, in brackets, is the tomb, sema, S-E-M-A, of the soul, which may be considered as buried in our present life, end quote. So he's just making it very clear here what Mr. Price is explaining. Some say that the body is the tomb, and then he says of the soul, sema. Yes, it's what encases your spirit or your soul within yourself, which may be considered as buried in our present life, meaning not revealing the soul, the spirit. Most people are not aware of that. The cities of the 7 societies were on the, and he gives a map here showing what we call the 7 cities in Asia. And you know, these are just simply what the scripture says. They're Thyatira, Pergamos, Smyrna, Sardis, Philadelphia, Ephesus, Eponymous, that can't be right. Is that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Yeah, Eponymous is where he's at. So he's showing this, what we call modern day parts of Turkey. And then Laodicea, the 7 cities in Asia. He gives a deal. So we go back to the part here simply up. And so the cities of the 7 societies were on the mainland, not far from Patmos, okay, where John was, or Johannes. Starting with Ephesia, the nearest to the island. They extended in their circular form and thus answered admirably the purpose of the allegory. But that there was no Christian society at Thyatira history is positive and is somewhat dubious about the others. Ephesus was celebrated for her wonderful temple of Diana, the huntress goddess, whom the Romans connected with the sign Sagittarius. And Sardius had a temple to the goddess Rhea, the, quote, mother, end quote, who was quite the moral reserve of the chaste Diana. At Pepazuzza, a desert place in Farajara, not far from Patmos and the 7 cities, there was a center of Mithra mysteries. A marked peculiarity of the Apocalypse and the 4th evangel is the constant use of diminutive forms as, quote, little lampstands, end quote. For in both works, Johannes deals with a microcosm. The small lampstands are the chakras, and their stars are the differential forces of the firmament. So that's going to be it. That's the conclusion of chapter 1. We'll do chapter 2 another day. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you listening, and hopefully you will understand what I'm sharing with you. These are very important things that this gentleman was trying to share with us over 100 years ago, you see. So the gentleman's name is Mr. Price, P-R-Y-S-E. You'd like to look into that. Okay, so thank you. Have a good night. And may you have ears and eyes to see. I should say have ears to hear, eyes to see. Again, thank you.